Welcome to Cockpit2Cowl, the show that explores general aviation safety topics from the combined perspective of flight instructors, pilots, and mechanics, exploring both pilot and aircraft topics to make aviation safer and more enjoyable. I'm Jeff Simon, pilot, AMP/IA, and president of SocialFlight.
And I'm Brian Schiff, an airline captain and 40-year Gold SEAL flight instructor.
How's things going in your world, Brian? Anything new?
Oh, just a lot. Yeah, everything is always new, and every day is more fun than the last, but there's always more to learn. And I got to tell you, something happened the other day, my last flight. I've been working a lot lately, and I was flying into Los Angeles, and as it is, we're coming in, and they said, yeah, caution, there's an A380 Super ahead of you, caution wake turbulence. So, most of the time when ATC tells a pilot caution wake turbulence, the pilot generally does nothing with that information. Now, I have 200 people sitting behind me relying on that, and generally what we will do is stay above if we can, and we know and picture where that wake turbulence is. Well, this A380 was ahead of me on the ILS, and we could tell he was high because we can see him on our traffic, cockpit display of traffic information, and we could see that he was above the glide path. So I'm trying to picture where his path is, and I'm trying to stay high above it, because I don't want to be below it. I don't want to hit that wake. And it resulted in, kind of a high approach, and like I'm a little bit higher than I wanted to be. And now I'm struggling with, okay, the policy of stabilized approach is what we're supposed to adhere to. If you're not stable in visual conditions by 500 feet, well, I was coming down a little steeper than I needed to, than I normally would, because I was staying high to avoid that wake. So what do you want to do? You want to hit a wake? Or do you want to follow the policy and be stable at 500 feet? Or I guess the correct answer is to just do a go around and eat into your precious minimum fuel that we don't carry a lot, because we want to carry keep the fares low, because everybody doesn't shop by how much fuel we arrive with. They shop by the fares. And so we try not to carry any extra, more than we have to. Now, I'm conservative. I had enough. The answer would have been to do a go around and come back, but it was just sketchy, and I'm just like, oh, I need a few days off after this. Kind of like, why is this guy coming in high? Is he just messing with me or what? But all's well that ended well.
Wow, that's good information, definitely.
Yeah, but pay attention to wake turbulence. It's a big, real thing. It's a monster that's invisible, and there are many accidents of it, because of it. And the pilot is the only, one involved with that can avoid the wake.
Wow. Well, that's very, very good information. We definitely got some new stuff that's been going on around here for anybody who's been watching our channel. You may notice.
I see something. What is that? I have a ceiling fan. It looks like yours is on the wall.
Yeah. That's not a ceiling fan, my friend. That is one big prop for our Mustang, courtesy of Hartzell. We got it from Hartzell. Hartzell Propeller owns Whirlwind, and we have a video out that if you want to go search on SocialFlight on YouTube of that showing up. And then when we get our firewall forward going on the Mustang here, I'll tell you, that is a big, big prop. So very, very exciting to have it there, and be even more exciting when we take it back off and put it onto the engine and start to see some things, make some noise and make some wind.
Yeah,
so very cool stuff.
I can't wait to not see it on your wall, but right now
Me too.
picturing an engine on the other side of that on a stand.
Exactly. The engine's already in the garage. We're in pretty good position here. Things are going to start to move really fast. So very, very cool. Well, tonight we are here to talk about after the accident and what people can know, because I think there's a lot that we really have to cover, and people don't necessarily give a lot of thought to this. But before we get started, just a couple things that I wanted to chat about. The first is a thank you to Avemco, who we researched a lot of our stuff with Avemco beforehand to learn with Marcy and Megan there what they see, what as an insurer, a typical insurer would want you to do, how to work with them. So that's just a piece of tonight's discussion. But thanks so much to Avemco for their help. Thanks to Greg Feith, who was on SocialFlight Live last week, an accident investigator for the NTSB, former, and lots of good information from him. And of course, your experience, my experience, and everything else that we're bringing to the table here. It's been really, really good to prepare for the show. And I want to mention one other thing, somewhat unrelated, which is just before the show, we got a message from UAvionics, who supports us, supports you, all sorts of, and I love their products. But for anyone out there, if you've been thinking about a UAvionics product, they just sent us a note that beginning to, I guess, tonight at midnight, they're offering $100 off on every $1,000 that you spend. Just go to uavionics.com, and they just released something integrated with ForeFlight. So go check that out. Very, very cool stuff. But yeah, like a flash sale that helps everybody with their panels. And you fly with one, don't you?
I think that's really exciting. I think I'm going to add to the UAvionics in my airplane, and those new features sound fantastic.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah. Well, so Brian, let's get started on this. I'm a huge fan of your show and the Schiff show, everything that you guys do. And it seems like the majority of discussions having to do with aviation safety are logically about how to avoid the accident. And
that's the first choice.
Yeah, obviously.
Right. Yeah,
and yet I've been present at about, I think, maybe 4 to 6 accidents that I've been there for. Not in the cockpit, not in the aircraft. Just want to be really clear.
Not involved, but present.
Not responsible for.
Yeah.
But present when it happens. And I think that really drove home for me how few pilots know exactly what to do after an accident or incident happens. That's tonight's broadcast. So you kick it off, my friend.
Well, I think that's a fantastic tool, and having at our access to talk to Greg Feith, and former NTSB inspector, and he does those aircraft crash, that show he does, crash investigations. It's pretty cool. And to talk to people directly at Avemco, the people who matter about this kind of stuff, was actually enlightening for me, because we don't teach, like you said, we teach the nuts and bolts of flying. We teach a lot of risk management stuff. Nowhere can you really find, nor are we required to know, what is required to, after you crash an airplane. So, God willing that you live it, you survive it, and you live. What do you do afterwards? And you have seen people mess that up by witnessing it firsthand. I can imagine that after we've discussed it, and after I've heard from the people at Avemco, that there are things I hadn't thought of. And I don't know that I really would have thought initially to call the insurance company. I would have thought FAA, NTSB, Dad, call my wife, but I would not have thought of that. And so there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and I'm looking forward to talking more about that with you tonight.
All right, Brian, let's start with the basics. And I think one of the most important things for people to understand when we're talking about what to do after an accident is essentially, what is an accident? What is reportable? Because a lot of this, there's a big gamut of things, right? You can land on the runway, you can get a flat tire, you can have some hanger rash, you could taxi into something when you're not even on the runway, or we could be talking about something really serious with loss of life. There's a huge spectrum of things that can happen. At the end of the day, how do we know what is reportable?
Well, at the end of the day, we know because the NTSB tells us so in Part 830 of the regulations. And let's go ahead and take a look at those. In Part 830, it tells us that immediate notification is required when, and there's a whole list of things that we'll go through. And bottom line, I don't recommend that anybody memorize all this. Know that it's there and how to find it, so you can look it up when and if needed. And hopefully you won't.
Or print it, right? Like have some of this stuff on a checklist in your airplane, which we're going to be talking more about.
Sure, it's one of the many things you could have printed, absolutely, yeah. The first one's an aircraft accident. So obviously, if there's an accident, you have to report that to the NTSB.
So that's a big statement, right? Because the FAA is big on definitions. So let's start with that, because we hear accident, incident, we hear all sorts of words. They care about accidents. So what is an aircraft accident according to the FARs and the NTSB?
Well, the regulations define an accident as an aircraft accident means an occurrence associated with the operation of an aircraft which takes place between any time the person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight, and all such persons have disembarked, and in any in which any person suffers death or serious injury. So anytime you get on the airplane for the purpose of flight until everybody's off the airplane, or in which the aircraft receives substantial damage. For the purposes of this part, the definition of aircraft accident includes unmanned aircraft incident as defined herein. So they're throwing in unmanned aircraft as well.
Okay, so then there's a couple terms in here which then require further definition, because they're using death, obviously is pretty straightforward, but they also say serious injury, and that could be a bump on the head or whatever. So what's serious injury then to define an accident?
Right. One person could look at the definition of serious different than the other. So they do define that. A serious injury means, according to the regulations, an injury which requires hospitalization for more than 48 hours, commencing within 7 days from the date of the injury was received. So if you have, like, you go to the hospital 6 days after the aircraft accident, then this would count as an injury related to that
So it
accident.
can even be following on afterwards. It can be something like you start getting headaches, you start having some, another issue that pops up that could be related. That goes all the way back to reporting it now.
It does. It does. So this can happen days after the accident, or something that was small gets worse. Sure.
That's fascinating to me, because it's almost the idea like you think you're okay and you discover later you've got a concussion, or later it turns out you had a broken bone or something like that.
Right. You go get your x-ray and find out it's actually broken. Now that's serious injury, of course.
Yeah, or in this case, of course, the 7 days has to do with hospitalization. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, right. So also it means any injury which results in a fracture of any bone, which we're talking about, except a simple fracture of a finger, toes, or nose. Those do not count. If the injury causes severe hemorrhages, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage, if the injury involves any internal organ, or involves any second or third degree burns, or any burns affecting more than 5% of the body surface, that's the definition of serious injury per the regulations.
It's so amazing, because this sounds like you're kind of reading something from a disability insurance clause or whatever. Like,
right.
two fingers matters, a forearm or whatever, like, internal organ, like this is really interesting for people to understand, because at the end of the day, it all boils back up. That means it's a serious injury. Serious injury means it's an accident. Accident means you got to report it.
It is, and I can only imagine all of the events that led up to writing these regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the next clause there that I think is important is substantial damage. And this is one that people I don't think necessarily have good answers to, and is really important for them to know. And that is the aircraft itself. What is substantial damage and what isn't? And so
it
if you
is
can bring
so
up
substantially,
that,
you often hear the aircraft was substantially damaged, or aircraft was destroyed. These words aren't just chosen willy-nilly. They're based on regulations and what happens because of those regulations.
Absolutely. And for substantial damage, it's interesting, because the Federal Aviation regulations really kind of break it out into two sections. And in the first section, they're really defining it. It means damage or failure which adversely affects the structural strength, performance, or flight characteristics of the aircraft, and which would normally require major repair or replacement of the affected component. So this, if we're talking about a major versus, we get into other regulations under Part 43, what's a major repair, what's a minor repair, things like that. If you've got to replace a wing, if you got to replace horizontal stabilizer, if a flight control surface needs complete replacement, like, it depends on what it is. But they're really talking about, have you affected the structural strength of the aircraft with this damage? In a way that it's really, non-flyable. And they try to clarify this after this statement by giving you examples of what doesn't qualify. So the second half of this is what doesn't qualify. And so they're listing things like engine failure or damage limited to an engine if only one engine fails or is damaged, like if it's a twin. They're saying things like bent fairings or cowling, dented skin, like if you just had a bird strike that just dented the skin but didn't necessarily cause a major structural damage to the aircraft, caving in ribs and things that require major repair. So they get into the cowling, dented skin, small punctured holes. You hit a sign I've seen someone do, little things like that on skin or fabric, ground damage to rotor propeller blades, things on the ground, damage to landing gear, wheels, tap flyer. We're going to talk more about tires, but wheels, tires, flaps, engine accessories, brakes, wingtips, all these types of things they give you as an example of that's not substantial damage. What they want to know is the aircraft compromised? If it's compromised for further flight, because if it is, that's an accident.
Makes sense, and it's interesting that they chose those specific things. But I'm not a lawyer either, but I'm surprised they didn't put something at the end like or any such damage or similar damage or something to kind of be a catch-all, because there could be a lot of things. And this also makes me think that if you have you can't just give a list and say these are the things you have to report. You really need to, after your specific accident, take a look and see, does this apply? Because there's so many different scenarios, possibilities.
And keep in mind, I'm going to say this from the mechanic perspective again, that things that happen later roll themselves back. And so you may have to ask your mechanic to answer some of this, because I'll tell you, if you do have something happen, some event happen, and at the end of the day, repairs happen, well, if that mechanic has to file a 337 form for a major repair that happened to the aircraft, well, then you better go back and report this as an accident, because you've just put documentation out there from the mechanic stating that there was substantial damage to the aircraft, and that boils its way back. If that were ever to be reviewed later on, they're going to basically say, we have evidence that there was substantial damage. You filed a 337 for repair to a control surface, repair or substantial structural repair to the aircraft, and this incident was never reported. So it really is important to understand this.
Right. It helps you understand why NTSB reports don't come out right away.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happens after the fact, and you can't really put a definition on everything until the dust has settled.
Well, the crazy part is this is all under number 1 of a long list. And number 1 is just an aircraft accident. So let's talk about what the next items are that are in their list about what requires immediate notification. And the next thing that's on the list here, number 2, is a flight control system malfunction or failure. So if you take off and you have a problem with a flight control, there's a failure of a flight control in flight with a rudder cable issue or something like that, and you have to land the aircraft, that's reportable. That's actually reportable to the NTSB. They may not take action if it's minor, but it is reportable.
It is reportable, and notice they say malfunction or failure. So if any flight control stops working, if you can't extend your flaps, so we got primary flight controls and secondary flight controls. So we get the primary, which is the aileron, rudder, elevator. We get the secondary, which is flaps, if you have spoilers, and things like that. But they're all considered flight controls. And if they fail altogether and just stop working, that's reportable. If they flutter a little bit and you go back and land, that's reportable. That's a malfunction.
Yeah.
Sure.
Trim system, right? You go to move it, it jams, it's not moving.
Right.
That's a reportable situation. And the reason important, this is important for people to understand what the reason is. The purpose of the NTSB is to create an environment of safety. And so it may not have caused an issue for you. You may be fine, but they want to be able to investigate and find out, do they have a systemic issue going on? It turns out that we've got lots of people who are finding in this particular aircraft that their trim system's jamming, or they had elevators with a problem or something else. Their goal is not to be punitive, but to research this and learn by it, and that's why some of the items are on this list.
Right, and when the NTSB sees that kind of trend, they'll make a recommendation to the FAA, and the FAA will issue, sometimes what we'll see is, things that, what's it called when you got to do something to your airplane? That have to be complied with every year, the ADs.
Airworthiness directive might come out.
Right, that. They might put one of those out.
Exactly. All right, what's number 3 on our list?
Number 3 is the inability of any required flight crew member to perform normal duties as a result of injury or illness. So if there's 2 of you flying, somebody gets sick, and the other one has to land the airplane. When we say crew members, I guess we got to talk about required crew members. So keep that in mind. If it's a 2-pilot airplane, it's obvious, but if it's a flight instructor and a student, for example, a student gets sick, the student is not required. So is that reportable?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. The instructor is required in the case of a student who hasn't got their private yet. So that would be reportable if the student had to land and the instructor was too sick to do their job.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that probably also applies to things like there's people who fly where there's two pilots and maybe one of them doesn't have a medical or something like that. And so there's only one pilot in command. They're perfectly legal. The pilot in command's the one flying. But if that pilot falls ill and the other person lands the aircraft, that's reportable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Number 4 is a failure of any internal turbine engine component that results, so this is for a turbine engine, that results in escape of debris. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah, in any internal turbine engine component that results in the escape of debris other than out the exhaust path. So like if you lose a compressor blade or a turbine blade and it goes flying out the side, punctures a hole through the skin, that's what they're talking about.
So if it explodes sideways, you got to report it. If it leaves the aircraft through the exhaust, no big deal. We'll deal with it at the next
just
one.
go. Yeah, someone will find it in their backyard.
You turbine guys, man.
Yeah,
all right,
boy,
what's next? Let's talk GA. Let's stick GA.
All right, but as a GA pilot, sometimes I airline somewhere, and when I get a seat, do you like to sit in the window seat right next to the engine? Do you ever think that? Does it cross your mind that that thing's spinning at 10,000 RPM right next to you?
It'll cross my mind now.
It will now, and everybody else who sees this, sorry. The other one is an in-flight fire.
Yeah, and an in-flight fire it's really important because I mean, you know, I've heard of people who've reported smoke in the cockpit, things like that. It's reportable. Now it depends on whether it's an actual fire as opposed to just smoke that happens, but really important thing to consider. Yep.
Well, now they say where there's smoke, there's fire, but if there's flames, there's fire. But do there have to be flames for there to be a fire?
Well, I mean,
Because
I'm
you can
not
have
going to play
electrical
lawyer
fire.
on this one, but I think they say the word fire, so I'm going to say that if something is just kind of smoking, that doesn't count. But if you know that you had a fire of some kind, I'm going to say it does. So I think they're
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
at.
I would look for an interpretation before I made a final ruling on that, obviously. But you know, you could have electrical fire. You get the smoke. You may not see the fire. It might be there. I mean, who knows?
Mhm.
I guess after you land, you might see some charred indication of fire, or it could happen. Electrical fire could be really anything. In that case, I think we have an electrical system thing coming up.
Well, when in doubt, report to the NTSB because
Exactly.
again,
Exactly.
it's non-punitive. That the goal here is not to get you in trouble. Here we
Right.
go. Aircraft collision, and notice they say in flight as opposed to taxiing.
You know why?
Yes.
Do you know how big the NTSB would have to be if everybody was reporting all the ground collisions? Southwest Airlines alone would. Never mind.
All right. Moving on. That one's pretty obvious. If you had a collision, that you better report that.
Right. Exactly. Damage to property other than the aircraft estimated to exceed $25,000 for repair, and that's the mention earlier. I mentioned there's a dollar amount, including materials and labor. Both of those added up, in excess of $25,000. Fair market value in the event of total loss, whichever is less.
Wow. So that does matter if you taxi into something. You know, what's the cost of repair of what you taxied into?
Right. If you hit something and the damage to that something is more than $25,000, including the labor to repair it,
Yeah.
yeah, or fair
You know,
market
before
value,
we move
whichever.
on, one of the quick things I want to do back on number 6 is, you know, people have asked a lot about bird strikes, and they're saying aircraft collision. And I think for our understanding so far of what we've talked to people about, this is actually vehicle collision. So that's not the bird strike kind of thing goes to that first stuff of what kind of damage happened. Does it qualify? I don't think that's collision. Is that your opinion also?
It is my opinion, and also, you know, a drone or unmanned aircraft is considered an aircraft
Yep.
by definition, so that would count. But a bird strike has its own set of rules as well. You are required. There's even an FAA form to fill out if you have a bird strike.
Wow. Okay. So what's number 8?
Number 8 is so simple, but luckily, I think that does not is you know, is not interesting to a lot of the people watching this program.
Big planes.
Yeah, this
Big
applies
plane.
applies to large aircraft, more than 12.5. And
Okay,
there's a whole
we
list
can
of
move.
things. So we're
If you're
showing it
flying
to you,
something that big, then you can call your lawyer.
and you can look at this and come back and read it later.
Yeah.
But this applies to aircraft over 12,500 pounds. Number 9
Okay.
is the release of all or a portion of a propeller blade from an aircraft, excluding release caused solely by ground contact, which is interesting. So if you lose the propeller tip cracks off, you lose that in flight, which will result in a pretty good vibration. That's reportable.
Yeah, this is a really big deal because the FAA, throughout their regulations, takes propellers very, very seriously. You can't do much without a propeller, and losing part of a propeller can ruin your day and set such an imbalance up that it can cause a lot of damage. And so therefore, they're always looking back to who worked on it, what happened, do we have an issue with a propeller? They're very, very focused and concerned with propellers. And so therefore, that's why they're sitting here and saying, look, we understand people taxi into, cones and things like that. They may start something and it hits a tow bar. The NTSB doesn't want to hear about all those things. But if you're flying and something happens with your propeller that causes you to, lose part of it, or, Senator Inhofe many years ago had a problem. The entire propeller departed the aircraft because it wasn't installed properly. That is, without a doubt, even if you land perfectly, that is a reportable situation.
Right, and that's obviously, it excludes a release solely caused by ground contact, like if you made, a landing and you hit something on the ground, or in the case of a tail dragger and you just got your tail up too high and you struck the ground. That is not what they consider now. You got to look at the other requirements as well. What else happened?
Yeah.
Right. Number 10 is the complete loss of information, excluding flickering, from more than 50% of an aircraft's cockpit displays, known as an EFIS, an engine indicating and crew alerting system, or an ICAS, electronic centralized aircraft monitor, ECAM, think Airbus, ICAS, think Boeing, EFIS, think, a lot of light aircraft have EFIS. Other displays of this type, which generally include a primary flight display, a primary navigation display, and other integrated displays, and also a multifunction display, I would consider part of that as well.
And I think what the FAA is really getting at, and the NTSB is really getting at here with the regulation, is, again, they're looking here to try to, they want to know if something happens that could be a systemic issue. And so that's their goal. They're sitting here and saying, look, if something happens to the aircraft and you lose more than 50% of your cockpit displays, that could be your whole flight, if you have a G1000, the whole thing goes out. Or if any other type of system that you've got where more than half of your key important displays go out, this is a way of them tracking and trying to be able to investigate, is there a software problem that might be common to multiple systems? Is there a design issue? Is there a problem with installation documentation? Again, non-punitive. What they want to find out is they want to hear about this so they can find out, oh, you're not the only one. We have a whole series of these. That's a very serious problem. We consider that reportable.
And you, as an aircraft owner with such a display, would want to know also if there are a lot of other aircraft with the same kind of display losing power to those displays. You'd want to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what we got next?
All right, number 11 is an airborne collision avoidance system. This is the aircraft that have TCAS, and most of our light GA airplanes don't have TCAS, so maybe we skip by that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, just to be clear, have they have traffic alerting in different ways. You can have versions that you just look at your ADS-B. That doesn't qualify. You can even have active traffic. I have that in the Bonanza, a Lynx active traffic system. That actually doesn't qualify because they're literally saying that you want to be issued a resolution advisory. You have to have a TCAS, I believe it's a TCAS 2 system or something, that it's a higher level system that has what's called an RA, a resolution authority. It's meant for large aircraft that tells you need to climb now. and tells you exactly what to do. If that happens, the NTSB wants to know about it because they then want to dig in and look and find out what happened at ATC at the time, what was going on. They want to learn and unravel why something got so serious that the avionics on board gave a very specific urgent resolution authority through a TCAS system. So it doesn't apply to most GA.
Right. Most operators that have those TCAS equipment will have forms that they fill out whenever they have an RA, a resolution advisory, like you're saying. So there's TA and RA. TA is traffic advisory. Hey, there's traffic out there at 12 o'clock, same altitude. RA is a resolution, like you said. It's giving you, hey, here's a resolution to avoid this conflict. Start climbing now. And it actually tells us the actual vertical speed to climb. And it's communicating with the other aircraft. So if it tells me to climb, it's going to tell that aircraft to descend. And the two actually coordinate with each other. So most light aircraft don't have this.
Yep. Number 12, we're talking about helicopters here, and they want to know, like, you know, helicopter tail or main rotor blades, including ground damage that, again, here's the qualifier, requires major repair or replacement. If something happens that you've got to replace a blade, they consider that something they want to hear about. And then 13, we removed, it's just an air carriers thing. And then why don't you go with the last one here, Brian?
Yeah, if an aircraft is overdue, it is believed to have been involved in an accident, not even known if it's an accident, you believe it's in an accident. So this is not even just your aircraft, but if someone's waiting for you, or you're waiting for someone to show up and they haven't showed up, they have left the departure point, you can't find them, they're missing. That requires a report to the NTSB.
I mean, it's important, right? The NTSB is this first number. It's your first call. That's what we're trying to say here, and let the NTSB make that decision.
And I think that's probably the best choice. You know, call the NTSB, report what happened, and we're going to give you the number, the accident hotline number in a little bit here, to tell them what happened. And if they say, no, we don't care about that, well, then you don't have to worry about it. But if they say we care about that, then, well, then you have a right to call. It certainly can't hurt to call. It's something that I think a lot of people are afraid to even talk to the government or to try to incriminate themselves. But that's how aviation works. It's a regulation, and we are supposed to report it. I think we're past the statute of limitations, but there was a day when I had an engine failure while I was teaching, and we did land in a field, and it was a loose fuel line. Our mechanic came out, hooked it back up again, and you know, tested everything, cleaned it off, and we were good to go. And the field was nice and hard and flat and no obstacles, so we took off. And should I have reported that to the FAA? In hindsight, and what I've learned recently, yes. You don't just take off again. The FAA people will tell you that that's what you should do. And you know, is there a specific FAR that we violated? Well, there's always 91.3 that they're going to get you on for. Well, that was careless. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what is, you know, it might be a pothole you hit, or a divot, or something you can't see, or a power line that you didn't see. You're always better off trying to just get the situation taken care of on the ground. And I've also, from speaking with Avemco, learned that they have people all over the country to transport aircraft that have landed off airport, and they would rather see you do the safe thing and have them help you transport it. That's what the insurance is for, safely back to an approved runway or strip. Now, people in Alaska are probably laughing at us.
Well, I know, again, you know, forced landings are an important one, and you mentioned something about that example about what it means with even a loose fuel line. And in those cases, the reason that the NTSB wants an opportunity at that is because they actually care about the cause. They actually care about, that's great, but did it break? Did someone forget to put it on? Is this something we need to know about and look at in terms of a trend or something like that? Because ultimately it caused a forced landing of an aircraft, and an unplanned forced landing. And so those types of things are important if it's off airport. Now, if you have something that you discover airborne and you're able to have a normal landing, that's a decision of the pilot. That's not a forced landing. And if you have a landing that turns into like a flat tire or something like that, again, you know, I believe the way it's written has to do with major structural damage as opposed to like something minor like hangar rash or hitting something small or whatever. That's not necessarily an NTSB situation.
Right, and there's a dollar amount for reportable to define it as an accident rather than an incident. But that's not necessarily what the NTSB draws the line on, what we want to know about and what we don't want to know about. It's just whether you're going to call it accident or incident. And at that point, it's kind of here or there. But I think you also want to help your fellow pilots from having this happen again. Like maybe you want to report it because if there's a trend of these things happening, we ought to know about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, it's almost for anyone who knows things about like life insurance and amortization tables and all these kinds of things, that's literally how the guidance for the NTSB reads. I'm not joking. When we were researching and went through this, it was literally like, well, fingers and toes broken is not considered an accident, non-major, non-reportable, and all these things. Like it has to be. They literally say fingers and toes don't matter, but you know it has to be like a limb. It has to be like a loss of like they go into pretty big detail.
Right. Right.
So let's talk about what one of the most important things, which I think is getting to the nuts and bolts of what happens when you find yourself in one of these situations. And if you're able to put up that slide that we put together on this, then I think
sure. Yeah, every time I've gotten into an accident, I'm kidding. I'm fortunate that, knock on wood, I haven't been there yet. But this is, I believe I'm sharing it now. So the first thing that we decided was what to do. What's a post-accident? And this is Brian and Jeff brainstorming what to do after an accident, and kind of in a priority order. And certainly this is, you want to look at your aircraft manufacturer, you want to consider your situation, because we could not cover every possible scenario, and this may not cover or be appropriate for every scenario either. So you want to take turns on these?
Sure. Well, one of the most important things after something happens of any kind, you may think it's minor. You may have swerved off the runway and taken out a taxi light or a runway light or something like that. You may be stuck in a ditch, may have a flat tire, or it might be a gear up landing or something much, much more significant. The same steps apply. And again, when we talked to the NTSB folks, the answers were all the same. You call us. They were very clear about that. And so for those wondering, like, well, can I go like by the wire of the bullets? Do I have to? They will answer that question, and they have a hotline for it. So I want to be really clear that you call them. And keep in mind something that we're going to get to later in the show, but I want to say it up front. The NTSB is a non-punitive agency. Calling them is not admitting to wrongdoing, getting you in trouble, causing issues or something. They may and will bring in FAA and certain things to assist with the investigation, but we'll talk later in the show about the difference between investigation and anything that may be punitive or corrective action separately. But there's no harm to calling that number. You need to call that number.
And that number is on the next slide, by the way. This is only half the list, so we're going to get to it. You'll see it coming up.
But let's say, so you get into any one of these situations, and it can always be more than you think. And so it starts with securing the most important things right away, which is quick and easy, if you can just go back to that, and that is fuel mags master mixture. We need to do this because you simply don't know what else is going on outside, and we don't want to start a small problem to turn into a big one. We don't want someone moving the prop and it could go off if the mags is there. We don't want fuel leaking. We don't want anything else that you can do. We want to immediately secure those things.
Right. And then the fuel, sorry, I promised I wouldn't, and here I did cut you off. The fuel, because I added that after we spoke, the fuel shutoff and also the mixture may seem redundant to do both of them, but you should do both because you don't know where you might have a leak. You don't know where the source is, and those are two different valves. Would you rather shut the fuel off at two sources or one?
Yeah, absolutely, very true. And your fuel selector, well, that's certainly the ultimate one, but it's going to be upstream. There's still fuel that's going from there to a carburetor or from there somewhere else in the engine. And if you've got a really hot engine, you don't want something dripping or coming out for any other reason. And so the mixture will help protect you with that last bit. Even though it's not a lot of fuel, it can still kick off a fire.
Right.
The next thing is evaluating the need for immediate evacuation, whether this is something that, regardless of people's condition that are on the aircraft, you have to get people out, period. Because it goes into the next one, which is accounting for everyone. The first thing you need to do is account for everybody on board and what their condition is, because everything else follows that. Obviously, if someone has a neck or back injury or something like that, you don't want to move them if you don't have to without EMS help. And so, the first thing, knowing, do we have something where it just doesn't matter, the aircraft, there's a fire, or after that, do you have time to figure out, is everyone okay? Is everyone present? What's your condition? And then move beyond that to the next step.
And can you continually reevaluate, because that could change while you're processing all of this. Where you have no fire at all, you might eventually have one. And also, so those two kind of go together: evaluate the immediate need for evacuation, and then account for all of everybody on board and their safety, their medical condition, whether or not you can move them. You know, if they're injured, you don't want to move them if you don't have to, obviously. But then exiting the aircraft and getting clear of the area, you know, we're trained at the airline to bring a fire extinguisher with us. You just never know. And if you don't have one on board, you should have one on board, and you should know where it is, and you should know how to get it with your eyes closed, because the odds are, if you have smoke, you're probably going to have your eyes closed. So practice that. That's something that I teach. Practice reaching forward and grabbing your fire extinguisher with your eyes closed. The other thing is, when you get off the aircraft and everybody's evacuating, that we do at the airline is we evacuate upwind. If there's a strong wind, you don't want to be downwind of the accident scene if there's a chance of a fire.
Yeah. So the most important thing at this stage of our checklist here is caring for the people on board, securing the aircraft and caring for the people on board, and getting them out of harm's way, which means getting out of the aircraft and getting out of the runway environment as quickly as possible. Yeah, because a lot of people get really fixated on, let me move the aircraft, let me see what I can do to move things, and the reality is that's not where your priority is. You have to remember, sometimes a first accident leads to a second one. And so you've got an aircraft blocking the runway, and someone could be on final, not talking on the radio, didn't see it, distracted in some way. Who knows what the situation is? You don't want to set up for another accident. So first, you take care of securing yourself and getting everyone out of the runway environment. And then your next step, actually at that point, should be to reach someone at the airport and get that runway closed, NOTAMed, people on the radio frequency, waving people off to let them know that there's a disabled aircraft on the runway, so that, again, we don't have that second accident. That's one of the most important things that you can do. Sometimes, if there's a tower, hopefully they saw it, but you want to get them involved. At small untowered airports, you may not have someone. You try to get someone in the FBO as quickly as possible. Try to get someone to do that, and then note them as quickly as you can. And if literally there's no one around at all, before you think, oh, I got to push this aircraft off the runway, get that airport NOTAMed, get that runway NOTAMed closed, and that just takes one phone call.
Yeah, and on that advice, I like to tell people to keep a written list of important phone numbers like that, because you may not have access to your iPad, your tablet, or your phone. It may not work at that point. You may have damaged it. It may be dead, and you may have to use a telephone, or someone else's cell phone, and you may not have access to those numbers. So I like to keep a written list of that. It's not long. Just print it up and put it in your your flight, your POH, or with the other documents. Just keep it with you.
Yeah.
So, and once you've done that, is there more on stopping the traffic and NOTAM and?
Yeah. So well, once you've you've done what you can at this point to protect yourself, the people that were on board with you, and now others around from the aircraft and everything else. Now you can start to take that breath and start thinking about the situation itself, and that is, how do we deal with the aircraft? And the two people that need to be contacted at this point, this is when the phone call happens, right? If there's someone needs urgent attention, 911. If it's not being done at a large airport, that's not already being handled, no question, you need emergency response. Next step on there, NTSB. Their hotline is here. They have numbers. They have someone to man that 24 hours a day. and they'll be able to answer that, and they'll be able to consult and get you an answer as to whether or not they will be investigating it, because they have that checklist. They know this isn't something I'm going to be investigating. This something is something I'm going to be investigating. And they can move. In some cases, it can be slow, but in some cases, it can be quite quick for them to know, really, oh, okay, don't worry too much about that. It sounds like you're actually okay. And they can answer a lot of questions for you. Brian, you mentioned the activate your ELT if needed. If you can't reach anybody, that is a source of being able to reach out.
Yeah, that's more for like an off-airport forced landing or precautionary landing off an airport, or if you're in a remote, non-towered airport with nobody around.
Yeah. And then the next thing actually is call your insurance company. And this may seem like something that's kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit in terms of like, well, what does this mean for insurance? But the reason this is so important is because insurance is involved in every single step of the process, and they're extraordinarily experienced in this, which means they know how to recover an aircraft. They know who to talk to preserve an aircraft, to make sure damage isn't going to continue to get done to it, etc. And so get them on the phone as soon as you can so that they can actually tell you who to talk to, instead of kind of going with the crowd or whoever the airport manager says, well, I'm going to call the local mechanic so we can tow this off the runway. Nope. That's not how you want to approach that. You want to approach that by NTSB and by your insurance company, even if you end up working out something different with them.
Right. Now, when I spoke with them, they assured me that they are not going to call the FAA. If you tell them, look, you want to tell them the truth, first of all, because they're going to find out the truth eventually anyway. The truth always shows itself in all of these investigations. And if you try to cover up something, if you screwed up, own up to it. Hey, I simply forgot to put the gear down. If that's what you did, own up to it. Tell them that. They're going to find out later eventually. And what you're also concerned with is maybe not getting your insurance coverage on the next airplane, or when this airplane is repaired, they may not cover you anymore if they find out you lied. So you want to be honest with the insurance company. Also, you're going to be pretty frazzled after an accident or an incident. These don't happen very often, and I'd like to think that our viewers are not the ones getting into it, but because you're here trying to educate yourself, and those are generally not the people who get into accidents. But if you do, here you are learning what to do, and you'll get the mentor of somebody at the insurance company to help you through that whole process, because you're not going to be thinking clearly and you're going to be in that post-accident fog, so they can help you through that. Yeah,
and so we're going to talk in a little bit about protecting yourself, both legally and kind of financially, legally, ethically, and so we don't get too much in this, but what we're really talking about when you make these phone calls is about what the situation currently is. This isn't the time to get into the story of what happened and how you got there. Brian mentioned something extremely important, and that is you're going to be mentally dealing with the results of what just happened. Perhaps a decision that you wish you made differently, especially if it's like a gear up landing. And your head's going to be thinking about a million things. This is not the time to tell the story of what you did. This is the time to describe the current situation. Who is here? What is their condition? Where is the aircraft? What is the condition of the aircraft? Like, that's what you want to really get out. When it comes to actually doing the rest, we'll talk about that, but that doesn't have to happen right away, and that has to be done in a very thoughtful and careful way.
And on that note, we have that actually down the list here, which I'll bring up in a second, but if it's a rental aircraft or someone else owns it, you want to call the owner of the airplane. You don't want, and take as many pictures as you can. If you have a camera, some people, before cell phones, they used to keep a disposable camera in their Go kit in their airplane, just because if anything went wrong, they can take pictures. Nowadays, we have the digital aspect of it. Some people carry an extra digital camera just for that purpose. Again, your cell phone may not work at that time. Take many pictures. You want to document and preserve the way everything is. You want to know how you left it when you were finished crashing it in case someone else damages it after the fact, right? You don't want to take the blame for that. But also, on that same note, when I say take pictures, a lot of you might be thinking about, oh, think of the clicks I could get on YouTube. Airplane crashes get a lot of clicks, and oh, if I could monetize that. Resist the temptation to do that. Don't try to get this on social media right away. That will be used against you later. Don't talk to the media. They'll want to know things, and that anything you say to them is going to be memorialized in a newsprint and will be used against you later. And you just never know what you're going to say when you're not thinking clearly. So resist that temptation. Take lots of pictures, keep them for yourself. Don't post anything online.
Yeah, I mean, the focus here is on preservation. Preservation of the people who were with you, of your health, of your rights, and of the aircraft. And you just want to protect all of that and deal with the rest of it later. And so I would also advise anyone who's been flying with you at that point, same kind of thing. Like, you want to give information that helps you with that. If anyone is hurt, deal with it. If anyone has any concerns, give all the information necessary to get that dealt with. Whatever it is that you need to in order to be safe and to preserve all of that. But the storytelling of how it happened and what went into it has to be very, very carefully thought and disguided and disclosed in the proper manner to meet the legal requirements, to meet the requirements of your insurance company, of the NTSB, and then of the FAA, which are separate processes and separate things. And that's important there as well.
Right. Take notes of everything you can remember. Tell yourself so you can use it later. You may forget a lot of things later, and you may get, amnesia from the accident afterwards, where you just can't remember this or that. Write down as many of the details as you can for doing that part later, if you have the opportunity to do so. And the pictures also of all your personal belongings, because if it's an accident that the NTSB does want to investigate, that accident scene is theirs. You may not be able to retrieve your personal belongings out of the aircraft. They're going to want to look at everything involved. They're going to want, if there's a cell phone in there, they're going to want to look at that. If there's a data card from the GPS or an AHRS, all that information is information that they can use in the investigation, and you may not get your stuff back. So those pictures can also kind of preserve and prove what you had as well. So that leave everything as is, as you can in there.
And the NTSB on that phone number, they will tell you if it is okay to move the aircraft and how. You don't want to just do stuff on your own. And you will find, again, I mentioned earlier that I've been present just coincidentally for several aircraft accidents when I was at an airport, present on the grounds when they happen. I was at one where a nose wheel came off. And the aircraft landed, skidded down the runway. I witnessed a gear up happen on the runway with that. I've seen a flat tire blow out and then aircraft turn off the runway and go into the grass off the runway due to that. And I've seen the recovery as well as several other situations. And I've seen the actions that take place after that, which are natural. They're human nature. Those three that I mentioned are minor situations, and meaning no one was injured in any of the three that I listed just there. And in those three situations, the same thing happened. No one paid attention to this list of what should be done. Instead, everyone kind of ran over and came up with ideas of what to do and just started doing things. And that's where you got to be really, really careful, because you start risking, if not your own, in those cases, since no one was hurt, if not risking your own physical health and those of your passengers, you are risking your financial health. If you're making decisions that could cause trouble, you could be risking your rights and your ability to fly if you're violating regulations by what you're doing at that moment, and very much risking the health of the aircraft by just seeing how people choose to do stuff. Usually people just say, is there a mechanic nearby? So they figure out, can we just jack this up and get it moving? Or can we start it up and taxi it a little further? And that tends to be a problem.
That was something very eye-opening to me when we were talking about this earlier. You said, "How would you know how to move your airplane? Do you know how to get it off? If it's tipped on its nose, what do you pull on to get it down? How are you going to recover it without damaging it more? You might have an aircraft that is really minor, you know." I keep the word injury is coming to mind. Has minor injuries. It's minor damage. Very minor damage that's easily repairable, like maybe just the wheel, the tire, the brakes, whatever. But then you said you've seen people, further damaging the airplane while being hasty in trying to get it off the runway. And that's something I don't know how to move my airplane.
I've seen some terrible damage done that way. And so I would say this. Again, let's talk about kind of who's in charge, right? When something happens, no matter what it is, we've said, first the NTSB has rights to decide what they're going to do. Your insurance company has rights if you're going to be, well, you should reach out to them no matter what. It's your choice if you're going to be making a claim based on it. But even if something you consider, minor, ultimately your boots on the ground there. Even if you don't own the aircraft, you're still responsible if you're authorizing things to be done because it was just you and then you let someone do something with a tractor. They're going to come after you if that incident caused a lot more damage to the aircraft. And I've seen a lot more damage done to aircraft in extremely, I'd say, kind of good intentioned but uneducated recovery efforts. And there are people that really know what they're doing, but it all starts with you as the owner. There are certain things with you as the owner that I think every owner should know how to recover their aircraft from a few basic things. And we're staying minor here. Those few basic things are, what happens if you blow out a tire? Like, do you have, I know that on my Beechcraft, on my Bonanza, you need to have a tool that goes into the axle if you're going to jack it up. Well, that better be carried in the aircraft. I carry that. I know how to jack that up. If you don't know how that is, then whoever it is that may not have ever seen a Bonanza may be the one to rush over and start jacking on that plane without your knowledge. You need to be the advocate to keep that from happening. And
how many wings have been punctured that way?
I've seen that.
Have you?
I have literally seen a wing get punctured when we went from like a $500, half a day issue to a $50,000, 5-month problem for nothing. And I'll say that a lot of people have an urgency in a case like this where the aircraft's stranded on the runway or on an active taxiway, to feel like this is an emergency, we have to get this off. And I'm telling you tonight, it's not. Other people need to make that decision. Other people need to tell you if it's actually okay to move it off. It is not urgent that you have to do by any means to move this off. Why? So the next plane can land? No, you're not at Chicago O'Hare.
Right, and even if you were at Chicago O'Hare, you cannot let that pressure of what's happening behind you, the other aircraft coming in, needing the runway, to have, if you land an airplane and you have a tire blowout immediately and you lose control, but you think, oh, I can taxi this thing off the runway if I had enough opposite brake and full power. No, whatever happens to your airplane, if you've damaged it, if you had a landing like that, stop on the runway. And not only that, but the runway provides a lot more room for the emergency equipment, if that's available, to approach your aircraft, and for help to arrive, or an ambulance or anything to taxi and park around the airplane. Don't try to be a hero and save the runway and get off the runway, even if the tower asks you to. It's a big fat unable. Stop it, secured as soon as you can.
Because they're going to ask you.
Yeah,
they will ask you to do it. If you land and you've got a flat, let's run with that for a second, Brian, because that's really, really good point. You land and you feel a huge pull from your right, and you look over and you realize you've got a flat tire there. At that point, and you're going to tell them I've got a flat tire, I can almost guarantee a tower, if you're a towered airport, is going to say, can you make it off the runway? And I can almost guarantee if you're at another airport, a whole bunch of people are going to come over after you get out and look at it and say, can we push it? And I'm going to tell you right now, a tire, then you're talking about, what, a couple $100? If the tire may even be fine, who knows? But the tube and whatever, but the wheel is thousands of dollars. And I have seen people push just to try to get something a little further and clear off a runway and totally destroy a wheel assembly that now, again, you just gave yourself thousands of dollars of damage for nothing.
And without this forethought, I would have been compelled to try to get off the runway if I could. Like, okay, the airplane's already damaged. Let me just try and get it off. I'll do what I can do to try. No, you've had, and you may be creating enough heat to start a fire by doing that as well. So the idea is, if something bad happened and you made an emergency landing and the airplane is damaged, stop on the runway. The insurance company owns the airplane and you own the runway.
Yep. So here, someone very rightly so commented in about how this has happened. They've gotten a lot of pressure from the tower to get off the runway. And you know, so how do they fight back against that? The answer is you tell them, this aircraft is not ready to be moved. I have called the NTSB. We're not just pulling this aircraft off.
I like it. You've got a third party involved, and now it's not you anymore. It's the NTSB.
The tower is not the NTSB, and and the minute you call that number, they have the right to decide. And at that point, remember, you still own it. Let them. I'd love to see what the case looks like of someone coming in and saying that this owner refused to let the aircraft move off the runway until it was properly done. And we think it should have been dragged.
Yeah, let's say pilot in command, not owner.
Yes.
Because the pilot in command,
good point.
In charge of
You're
that
still
airplane.
a pilot in command of the aircraft. Good point.
Right. And you're gonna, if you're doing the right thing, you're securing it anyway. You're not going to hear that because you're turning your radios off, your master off. And if you even heard it, if you ignore it, turn your radios off. You've secured the airplane. Just ignore it. Turn your radios off.
Yeah. And I guess if that really gets to that adversarial situation, we're kind of going down a rabbit hole, so I don't want to go too much further. But if you do get into some adversarial situation where someone is kind of forcibly wants to move your aircraft against your will and intention of going NTSB, insurance company, proper recovery, then you have the other things that Brian mentioned. Take the photographs, document it all, and then if you have to walk away, you walk away saying, like, just understand, I've documented all of this. Every bit of liability that you're doing right now to whoever you're talking to is on you. Yeah. And great, you will wind up with brand new wheels, but it won't be your expense.
Right. I saw a question in there about what happens if the local police arrive first, and that's very likely to happen. And that's a good question because you need to take control of that situation, and they may feel with their authority that they have the authority to say, all right, we're moving all this. No. Again, no, good answer.
The National Transportation Safety Board, they have the right to that.
Exactly. Call the NTSB. It's their airplane now. Yeah, exactly. It's their scene.
It's their scene. And I think that's the important part. It's their scene, and it's the insurance company's aircraft when you really think about it in terms of that. Now, again, you can always waive the insurance company part, meaning if it's something minor and you choose you don't want them involved, if it's something major and for some reason you don't want to use them, but it is essentially the NTSB scene and the insurance company's aircraft at that point. I think that we should talk now a bit about liability and process because there's a lot to this that I want people to understand. And the two most important things that matter here is to understand the roles of the NTSB and the FAA, and that the process is, I said two most important things. I think the most important thing is that there are two steps to the process. The first is the accident investigation that is owned by the NTSB. They can send that, they can choose to delegate that to the FAA if they want. They can choose to let it go. They can choose to say it's doesn't qualify, but they have the accident investigation. And the accident investigation is, as mentioned earlier, a non-punitive process. It is about finding out what caused it, what can be improved, how can safety be served. Was there an issue that was pilot, or was it an issue that was condition on the condition or the aircraft? What is it that we can do to preserve aircraft life, limb, and property? And anyone involved in that process, that is non-punitive, and the information that you give, you should communicate with the people asking and say, are you associated with the investigation? And if they say yes, then first of all, you do not have to speak at that time. You can take as much time as you want. You can wait a few days until you feel like you've got your head together. You should take your time before you talk to them. But the information that they're gathering is just for them, and it's just for that process. The report that they issue at the end, based on your information, will give their opinion. But it's different than part two. And part two is sort of the punitive side of the FAA. And that's why you ask that question. Are you associated with the investigation? Because if someone calls you later and says, hi, I'm from the FAA, I want to talk about that, the ground loop that you did, that incident at the airport, the gear up landing, you ask them what what they said, and they tell you, no, I'm actually investigating this from a compliance and enforcement perspective, or an education corrective action perspective. That's not the investigation. That's something where you might want to get a lawyer. You may want to get a lawyer for either case, but they are not the same hats, and those two people cannot mix, and that's really, really important. They cannot mix. If you talk to one FAA person that is helping with the investigation, they cannot use that information for prosecution or corrective action or anything like that. Those people have to have a different hat on. They have to ask you all those questions from scratch, and you do whatever you want to in that case.
Two things come to mind. One, if you are talking to the NTSB and you do give them that information and they create a report, a lot of people don't go back and look and see if they got it right. They take quick notes, and they might get it wrong. You want to make sure they got it right by following up afterwards. Another thing is when you get that call from the FAA and they're investigating now for compliance or whatever, you don't have to talk to them right away either, and you don't have to talk to them alone. Like Jeff said, at work we have our union to help us. Where I'm at the airline here, in General Aviation, I pay AOPA for their legal protective services.
Me too.
Yeah, and I've used it. Their lawyers are fantastic. They're focused on aviation. Your personal lawyer at home might not understand the aviation aspect of it all. I recommend having the pilot protective services from AOPA, and then they would be maybe your third or fourth call down the line, and set up an attorney so that you can know how to navigate the legal part of this properly, because you're not going to be able to do it on your own.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily make them like too far down your list as far as like calling them also, because once you are going to be doing an interview with someone, it does make sense to talk to an attorney before you do that interview. And if you're part of Pilot Protective Services with AOPA, then they're going to, at very least, give you some guidelines. And at most, they may tell you, nope, we need to assign you someone, and that needs to be arranged offsite.
You get the immediate advice like, hey, don't talk to anybody. Tell them I'm going to get my lawyer and I'm going to talk to you later. I'd set up an appointment for that.
There is no such thing as what you see on TV of, if you cooperate now and you just answer our questions, we won't, make this bad for you. But if you lawyer up, then we're going to make this bad for you. That's just simply not the way it works. And I'd love to say it's not the way it works because they're just going to be nice no matter what.
I know some FAA inspectors who would probably disagree with that, because they really would say, and they're going to tell you, look, help us do this now. Let's do this the easy way. You lawyer up, we're going to do it the hard. You do it the hard way, we're going to do it the hard way. And they'll try to intimidate you into it, talking and cooperating right away. And it's compelling to do so. We want to do that. We want to help people. We want to help them figure things out. We want to say the right thing. We want to be nice. Well, most of us. I know some people who don't. But and that goes the same with getting the airplane off the runway or out of the way and all that. We want to try to get and appease what everybody needs, and that this is not the time to do that.
Well, my understanding from, and I'm not trying in any way to speak for the FAA, but from the FAA people that I've spoke to, who I like, who are friends of mine, when we talk about where the gray area is, and if there's an FAA person on, please correct me if I'm inaccurate, but where the gray area is not about, are we going to take action or are we not going to take any action at all? Like, are we going to look the other way? It's not like, if you talk to a lawyer, we're going to throw the book at you, and if you just casually answer all our questions, we're just going to look the other way. It doesn't work that way. What they care about, and where the gray area is what your attitude is. Do you have a constructive, positive attitude towards everything? That's where they make their decision on what the action is going to be based on the situation. Are they going to simply help you learn so that this doesn't happen again, or do they feel like you're reckless and something needs to be corrected, or you're a danger, even if you know that they don't trust you? Essentially, it's your attitude, and I believe you can have a positive attitude. Very much. I want to work with you. I feel terrible that this situation happened. I do need to first just consult with my folks before I get back to you. You don't even have to say who it is, because you have the right to consult with anybody. And I don't think you get penalized for that, because I don't think they have the ability of simply pretending they never saw it if you were really nice.
Right. Right. And I think that you can also lay the blame on an attorney if you call AOPA or your attorney and they tell you not to talk to anybody. You can say, look, my lawyer said not to. We're still trying to figure things out. But you kind of lay the blame on them instead of on you, that you're not supposed to talk to anybody yet. Certainly do not talk to the media. The media will be persistent. They will want to know. Airplane crashes are fantastic news. Why? Because they don't happen very often. And they're also fantastic. They're fun to report. They really get a lot of views on that. So don't be compelled to talk to the media. You're going to want to. Try not to.
Yeah. Now, during the initial, when you do ask someone if they are part of the investigation, when they're asking you questions, and they do say that they are, you have an interesting right, and that right is only to speak to the NTSB. That is it. You have the right to kick out everyone else from the room, including an FAA representative, unless they are being delegated as acting as the NTSB, which they're allowed to do. If it's a minor situation, the NTSB can say, call the FAA and say, we're delegating you as the investigation for this, Bob Jones, make up a name, and you're acting. We're delegating this. You're our NTSB investigation. Well, if that person is that, then they're the ones that you have to talk to. But you don't have to talk to anybody other than that, and you can kick all the rest out, because, again, they, meaning someone not associated with the investigation, but associated with one of the FAA's other 8 responsibilities having to do with safety and trying to make sure you are safe and the aircraft is safe. That's a separate discussion, and you may choose to be completely, as you should, open with the NTSB, explain everything you need to, and then take your time, use a lawyer, do whatever you need to on something that has to do with your certificates or any punitive action against you.
Right. And if you did all the right things, you should have nothing to worry about anyway, right? But know your rights. The rights have gone pretty far. We have now the Pilot Bill of Rights. You get it all the time, and every time you fill out your medical exam, you check the box that you received it. Anytime you do anything, you check the box you received the Pilot's Bill of Rights. Maybe print it off and read it every now and then so you have an idea. Just become familiar with that so you know what your rights are when this happens. If you're not familiar with them ahead of time, you're going to be under the gun after the accident or incident, and you're not going to know.
Yeah. The other thing that also, go ahead.
I posted the number in the chat again. I see some people were asking for it again. I'll post it again. So if anybody wants it, it's fresh at the top of the chat.
And you can put up that slide that people can do a screenshot of also that has the different phone number.
All right, I'll put that back up again. Sure.
The other thing I want to make sure people understand that as we were told by several individuals when we researched for this, is when people ask you for your certificates or any information, you can show that to them. You should not hand that to them. You can provide copies to everybody, but unless you are being requested to surrender your certificate, which would be part of a corrective action or a punitive action from the FAA, that's a different type of thing. You do not want to hand these things over at the scene or in any interview. That's the idea of surrendering your certificates, including your medical or anything else. It's not uncommon that people have turned documents over that are originals and they never get them back, even if it's not an issue. You don't want to give original information to any of these investigating bodies, be it punitive or be it just accident investigation.
Yeah, I meant the Q&A. I posted it in the Q&A, and I put the checklist on the screen again for take a picture. And here comes the second page of that. But also, you can watch this again on SocialFlight.com. You can also watch it on. Is that the only place I can watch it, right? On SocialFlight?
Yeah, because of getting FAA credit. Yeah.
Right. So you can go back and get Wings credit again if you need, but
well, we'll have it in both places. We'll have it on our YouTube channel where you can watch it, but you will not get Wings credit for watching it on YouTube. If you joined us here this evening, you will get Wings credit for joining us here on the show tonight. That'll be automatic, assuming you stayed with us long enough. And if you take it as a course in SocialFlight, where you go to SocialFlight.com and then you click on FAA credits, you can take tonight's show and any of the Cockpit2Cowl shows, watch it there within SocialFlight, and then you get a survey and a quiz, which is part of how we track that you watch the entire program. It's an FAA requirement, and then we can issue you automatic Wings credit. And so again, it just depends on how you want to see it. You just want to watch, go to YouTube. You want to see it again and get credit. Make sure people use SocialFlight.com and the FAA credit section.
Right. And again, it's not in the chat, it's in the Q&A, the questions section is where I posted it as a question. And thanks for clearing that up, Jeff. But everybody here now watching it, you are going to receive Wings credit automatically.
Yeah. So, we try to cover a lot of stuff. We could talk for a very, very long time about this, but hopefully you understand the most important highlights. Understand your aircraft. Know some things. We've all, you've all seen videos, I'm sure, of like a tail dragger that stops and brakes lock up and it flips onto its nose. Well, do you know the best way for if you fly that plane, you should be the one that at least knows a safe way to get it back down without causing further damage, so that hopefully the insurance company, everybody else, you get the right person there, but you also know what's wrong, because again, in those 3 incidents that I was privy to, I saw people before I got there causing damage that it just should never have happened. And the only thing they were trying to protect, I guess, was the airport. And they really didn't do that in any way. So know the process and the steps you have to go through, and understand what your rights are, and read the pilot's Bill of Rights. It covers mechanics, it covers owners. It's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Be familiar with that. Be as familiar with all of these things as you can be. I'm going to send out a newsletter before I have my Schiff show coming up this week on Thursday at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night, there'll be a reminder email. So if you're signed up for my emails, I'll put the regulation for part 830 in there. I'll put a link to that, and I will also put a link to this checklist, and also the recording of this show when it becomes available as well. So I'll have links to all that in my newsletter, and I'll be doing my Schiff show Thursday night. I'll be talking with a corporate pilot, good friend and former NAFI friend, John Niehaus, and he's got some great advice. We're going to talk about a Learjet accident that happened in Teterboro back in 2017, and how professional pilots can have that happen, and what you can do to prevent that kind of accident as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very good stuff. I want to add a couple quick things, even though we're running over a little bit now, and that is one thing that came out also during a lot of our time talking about this is resist if you wind up in a situation that you sort of think you can kind of look the other way, resist the temptation. Resist the temptation to have something happen at an airport that's small or you had to land somewhere unintentionally, get something fixed and take off. Resist the idea of pretending it didn't happen or not reporting it, because we live in the world right now where even if you don't post it on YouTube, what we're getting out of the folks that we've talked to at the FAA is someone always tells them. Someone always tells them, like, hey, do you see that one that landed there and went off into the grass and you know, ding the prop, but then they just came and put a new prop on and they just took off. Do you know about that? Someone always says something. And if you're not the one that sort of fesses up, that's when the FAA gets a little frustrated and you don't get treated as nicely as you could.
Fantastic advice. Yeah, you're always being recorded. Live your life like you're always being recorded, because the odds are you are being recorded, especially on an airport. There are people that just love to record takeoffs and landings all day long. Plus, there are Ring cameras that seem to capture these things all the time.
Yeah. And I want to do a shout out also. We started the show with talking about Avemco because you and I are both very big fans of Avemco. And I talked to them quite a bit in preparation for tonight's show. And one of the interesting things, they're unique because they're not just an agent, they're the underwriter, they actually pay the claims, etc. And so a lot of people ask questions of me that had to do with things like, well, what if they want to total my airplane, but I still want it? What if I want to repair it, even if it's not economical? What if I want this, or what if I want to do something different? Or what if I want some personal stuff out of my aircraft before it gets salvaged if this happens? And the nice thing is, since Avemco handles both sides of it, you can at least talk to someone. You can at least ask them, and in most cases, they'll work something out with you. They'll be there for you. And so otherwise, understand that if when something happens to your plane, it's going to have to be evaluated as to whether it's repairable, rebuildable, meaning a much more significant type thing, or salvaged and wind up in a salvage yard. And if you're really attached to that, if you want to stay in that process, it's a little harder to do with a larger insurance company, but you can try. But you have to be proactive. You really have to get in there so that as part of this whole process, once the investigation's over, you can try to get involved. And understand that investigation can take a long time, and it can take a long time to release something, an aircraft, if people were injured. If there's any chance anyone was injured, there could be things that are retained for a long period of time, because it could be 5 years that people can go and file an injury claim, and then they want all the evidence. So it can get really ugly really quick. But just a shout out to Avemco, because it's one place you can call. You can get your questions answered. And if you have questions from tonight's program, call them. They may have answers to you about what to do if something happens for you. And if you don't have them, mention SocialFlight. You get 5% discount. So check all that out.
And I'll vouch for their friendliness. If you call them and ask them a question just for your educational sake, or as getting help after an accident or incident, I guarantee you they're going to help you in a friendly way. They're fantastic people.
Absolutely. Well, we came to another end of another fun Cockpit to Cowl show, Brian. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, kind of a bummer topic, but very important one. And I always have fun talking to you.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back. I know that I will be back next week on Tuesday night. We're going to be having another great SocialFlight Live show. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to have Mark Cook, who was the editor. He goes back in the whole kit planes world for a very long time. Really fun and fantastic stuff. So he's going to talk about his time at Kit Planes, his whole world in aviation, and now he has landed at Vans Aircraft. And so for that show, just go to socialflightlive.com, one word, socialflightlive.com. It's going to be a lot of fun hearing his story, his opinions on what's going on these days, what's new at Vans, how's things going with their tail wheels, speaking of tail wheels. And so we've got that show coming next Tuesday, December 16th. Mark Cook.
I look forward to seeing that, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. Again,
yeah, that's going to be January 13th. January 13th here, Cockpit to Cowl, you and I think we might talk about how to crash an airplane.
I think we should talk about how to crash an airplane. I've got a lot of great information on that and some resources. Excellent. Love it. Well, I will see everybody who joins us on Thursday night, day after tomorrow, on the SchiffShow.tv.
I'll be there. No question. I never miss one. I love it.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you who've taken time out of your evening to join us here on Cockpit2Cowl. I'm Jeff Simon for SocialFlight. And from me, I wish you all blue skies.
Good night, everyone.